98.1 KZE, good afternoon and welcome back. This is Will with you here for another installment of the Midweek Meetup, a new feature of the Afternoon Drive program where we take a deeper dive into matters facing our KZE community, our United States, and our world. And our guest in the meetup this afternoon, Assemblymember Didi Barrett. Didi, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Will. Great to be here.
You are my first guest in the meetup post-vacation. Welcome back to the program. It's been a few years.
Yes, it has.
We used to see you a little more when you were working on like Millbrook Community Day and things like that.
Right, and when I was first elected, because Red Hook was my district.
That's right, and there was a change in some sort of the map.
Redistricted, right, exactly.
So you are the Assembly member for Assembly District 106.
That's right.
Let's talk about that district so folks can get to know what that space is a little bit.
Sure. So the most southern end of the town is the town of Poughkeepsie, and it's the half of the village of Wappingers Falls that's in Poughkeepsie. That's the most southern part of my district. I don't have the town of Wappinger in my district, so I just have the Poughkeepsie side. And then the most northern end is the part of the village of Chatham that's in the town of Ghent. So I don't have the town of Chatham, but I have the town of Ghent. So those are the sort of the tips of the district. And roughly it goes, that's north to south about 70 miles, and then east and west, it goes from the river to the state borders, the Connecticut and Massachusetts borders, but there are cutouts. This is, if you want to know what gerrymandering looks like, take a look at my district.
Yeah.
I have the town of Poughkeepsie, but I don't have the city of Poughkeepsie. And I have Hyde Park and Clinton and Milan and Germantown and Claremont, but I don't have Red Hook and Rhinebeck. So those are notched out. I go straight along 44, Pleasant Valley, Menia, but I don't have the town of Washington. So it was, it's a great district. It's just an oddly shaped district. I have incredible institutions of higher learning, Vassar, Marist, the Culinary Institute, 2 community colleges, Columbia Green and Dutchess. I've got this amazing agricultural economy, beautiful farms.
And that's something you're pretty passionate about, as I remember from our past talks.
I have the FDR Library. I have Mills Mansion and the Vanderbilt Mansion and Claremont and
Lucky you.
Olana and then the wonderful city of Hudson. That's the only city I have. So it's quite rural, but I have that great little city and then kind of a quasi-suburban blocks in Greenport and Poughkeepsie and a little bit of Pleasant Valley.
So again, not the city of Poughkeepsie.
Right, just the town of Poughkeepsie.
Yeah, that's kind of strange, I guess.
It is, yep.
Let's not get too into the weeds with the gerrymandering. I would love for you to come back and talk about all sorts of things, including that,
sure,
if we can. But that is something that I think a lot of people are interested in. And I would say go to a map of both local state districts and then also congressional districts in the area and start to study those maps. There are some very strange things that you will find that might not make sense to you.
Right, exactly. And our map is on our website, which I know you're going to give that information. But
absolutely. And also, while we're on the subject, your email address, if folks want to get in touch with Assemblymember Didi Barrett, you can email Barrett D at nyassembly.gov. That's BARRETT, the letter D, at nyassembly.gov. And you are, in my experience, fairly easy to get a hold of.
We are all about access, and we respond to our emails, to our phone calls, and as you know, we do diner stops all over the district as well. So we are
the diner stops.
We go visit our community throughout the district at diners on a regular basis. So and we let people know in the local towns when we're going to be there, so they come and talk to us there as well. So we are all about being accessible. I
want to back up just a little bit and set the table for our listeners and get to know you a little more. Did you grow up in the Hudson Valley?
I did not. I was born in New York, and my family moved to California when I was 3.
In New York City?
I was born, actually, I'm kind of in Long Island.
Okay.
But my dad grew up, spent a lot of his childhood in Columbia County in Ankrum.
Okay.
And I spent a lot of my childhood back and forth between New York and California.
In the Southern California.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
And at what point did you come back to the Hudson Valley to live full time?
In the sort of mid to late 1970s,
okay,
and I've been here since, and been up in this area for 30 years, and seen lots of big changes, and just feel very fortunate to live in such a beautiful and diverse and incredibly energized and energetic place with, just so much history and culture and resources and the great booming agricultural industry as you've talked about, and then the natural resources, the river and the parks, the state parks and the landscape. It's a pretty special place.
Did you ever think you would be involved in politics as a young person?
I was interested in high school and ran for office and was elected in high school. And that was sort of an era where...
What was your office?
Well, I was, as a girl, I was usually the secretary, which was just sort of the thing that girls ran for.
Yeah, that's like still going, maybe not now, but when I was in school, that was still going on. I'm a little younger than you.
It's so ridiculous. And that's part of why I did run for office when I did, because I do want girls growing up today to understand that this is what elected officials look like, and that they too need to be at the table when decisions are being made that affect their lives.
It's like programming. I mean, you see it in groups of children, and again, I'm not in school anymore, so maybe less so now, but you see young women just sort of pick up the pen and start taking notes as if that's their only option sometimes.
Right. Well, unfortunately, there's a bit of programming to that. But I have to say, I've been really heartened in the last number of months to hear about so much interest on the part of young women and girls, and just personally the calls that we got from people that we know, and friends of, like, I was at a family dinner with a friend of my son's, and she said, now after this last election, I know I need to step up and run. I'm not sure when my moment is, but I'm going to do it. And been hearing that from, we had got that email from an intern that's been in our office and said, I need to run. I need to do this. And so and I think these organizations like Merge America and Eleanor's Legacy that work with women candidates are seeing just a huge influx of interest.
You're listening to another installment of the Midweek Meetup on 98.1 KZE, a new feature of the Afternoon Drive program where we take a deeper dive into matters facing our KZE community, our United States, and our world. And Assemblymember Didi Barrett is our guest in the meetup this afternoon. Who were some of your heroes as you were getting interested in leadership, people that you looked up to that informed your worldview?
I think that probably the first and foremost is Eleanor Roosevelt, and that started. I happened to be part of a Brownie troop growing up in Southern California, where one of our members' mother was a goddaughter of Eleanor Roosevelt, so she actually visited our Brownie troop. And so,
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes, and meeting
Eleanor
her
Roosevelt
at 8. Yeah,
visited your Brownie troop.
When I was about, I'm trying to remember, 7, 8 years old. I mean, obviously a young child, and that was truly a seminal moment. And have always, and I, my parents grew up at the, in the era of the Roosevelt administration, and I would hear stories about the fireside chats, and that they were certainly iconic figures even in my Southern California household. So to represent a district that has the FDR library in it is, pretty incredible for me. And so she's always been, I never tire of just reading what she had to say about things, that she was so prescient and so smart and so
funny,
but also, and just so kind of, her heart was in the right place on just so many different issues. Really value system that, that is as relevant today as, as it ever was around human rights and civil rights. And
how out front was she, right? On the right side of history, like every single
absolutely.
issue.
There's,
pretty much.
There's a, one of the, I'm a big fan of Twitter and Instagram, but there's a Twitter account that I follow that comes up with quotes of hers, sort of every few days. And as, FDR Library does great stuff on their social media as well. But the things that she said 40, 50 years ago, and I had an opportunity to speak at a Memorial Day parade in the last year or so, and used actually the speech that she had written 70 years ago. And it could have been written today. It's so, she just was, it shows you how things don't change, but the fundamental values and the things that are really important stay true and continue to be things we need to talk about and think about.
It's really striking how so many politicians from that era, their worldview hasn't necessarily aged well, right? We have to say, oh, well, he was a man of his time, and you don't really have to do that. with
that's a really good point.
with Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Let's transition here and talk about some more recent events of the opening of this stabilization center in Poughkeepsie. And I know you were involved in that, and there are a couple of different angles that I'm interested in. One of them being, and this was a real effort of folks on the Democratic side and the Republican side coming together to open up this new institution. Can you tell us about the stabilization
Well,
center?
it's actually a really remarkable facility, and I was very honored to be able to support and get state money there, along with Senator Serino and.
You're a Democrat.
I am a Democrat.
She is a Republican.
Yes, that's right.
Working together.
And our county executive is a Republican. And this is a.
That would be Mark Molinaro, who
right.
has been a guest on the midweek meetup, and we hope to have him back. But continue.
So he has, and I really respect his leadership on this Think Differently initiative, and I have personally had a long-time commitment to mental health and substance abuse and fighting for parity in the way that we look at health and making sure that recognition of mental and emotional health issues are part of the education of our children. Last night actually was at an extraordinary gathering of almost 500 people in Chatham with Chris Herron, the former Celtics basketball player who
yes.
had a really
yes, this is coming back to
this
me.
is really
yes.
extraordinary story, and he does he goes around. He's very committed to talking to high school kids, and he had spent apparently 2 hours during the day with the kids at Chatham High School and surrounding schools. I think they brought kids in from all over, and then he did this again in the evening. For a lot of the kids went home and said to their parents, "You got to come to this. You got to hear this guy." And he was really incredible. And Chatham has really also, like the stabilization center, been very proactive in understanding the emotional and psychological implications of substance abuse and helping to sort of facilitate treatments that aren't blaming the victim, that aren't telling people there's something wrong with you if you're an addict, or there's no place for you in our society. I mean, there's so many stigmatizing approaches that this Chatham community has been very involved in really embracing, and started a Columbia County Pathways to Recovery initiative, and Chris Herron was there as part of that. Stabilization Center also is a place to really get people before the crisis that leads them to jail or into a hospital with an overdose, and is working in a holistic behavioral health model to and working with law enforcement so that they're prepared and trained to recognize what's not an aggressive action, but what's a cry for help. So, I mean, I think there's increasing amount of work in this area, which I'm really happy to.
Right, this is a real shift.
It's a beginning of a shift, and Dutchess County is really pioneering in this stabilization center. It's this was, I believe, the first in the state and one of the few in the country to be approaching it this way.
Yeah.
And also what we see in this Chatham community embracing, because it's the police department that's involved in the, and it's
do you feel like everybody's on the same page, pulling in the same direction?
Not at all.
Okay.
No, there's a lot of work to be done. So these are cutting edge initiatives.
My guest this afternoon, Assemblymember Didi Barrett, for the midweek meetup here on 98.1 KZE. You said this is kind of the beginning of a shift, and it feels to me like this is a crucial point that we're in with the way we look at criminal justice, mental health, and substance abuse issues. And my concern is that at the federal level, we now have a United States Attorney General who, in my view, he seems to see the world of criminal justice. It's like something out of 1958.
Exactly.
It's very concerning to me. But I think at the local level, there is, here in New York State, in the Hudson Valley, promising signs.
There are definitely promising signs, and I think there are pockets of this kind of work happening, all over. And the challenge is to make them more part of the mainstream. And as you say, what's happening at the federal level is not particularly helpful. It's the stigma is,
law and order will not solve these problems.
We've seen that. I mean, I think we tried that, and it, and it obviously has not worked. And no child growing up looks as their model and says, yeah, I want to be a drug addict, or, I want to live on the street, or I want to, this is not who we are as human beings. So these paths that people end up taking we have to look in a holistic way about what the behavioral, the implications that lead to these kinds of behaviors are, and address them at the place where we can change behaviors, where we can support, and where we can create a recovery environment that really helps people stop being addicts and look at their life in a whole different way, and have the tools and the support to be able to live the life they really want to live.
It's depressing how much we hear people say Washington is broken. I mean, it's just become this knee-jerk reaction. Albany is broken. We hear that all the time, but this is a positive story. This is something where Republicans and Democrats at the local level came together and are showing some signs that they're going to take a new approach to a problem.
And I think this is something that has to continue to happen here. I mean, in our counties, one of the first meetings that I pulled together after being elected was the sort of mental health communities in both of the counties, Dutchess and Columbia, that I represent. And we had the commissioners, and we had people dealing with the veterans communities and the aging communities and the school communities to all kind of share their issues, because there isn't the funding necessarily at the state level. There isn't the, in this era of managed care, there isn't the infrastructure to do the work that we've been talking about. And so it's great to have these pockets like the Stabilization Center or what happened in Chatham to be able to talk about and to use as models. But we have to create an infrastructure that supports this for the long term. 'Cause
that's going to take a long time.
None of these are quick fixes, but it's also changing the mindset, and that's a really important part of the process.
Didi Barrett, Assembly Member for District 106. nyassembly.gov is where you want to go to get in touch with Didi Barrett, and you can also email Didi Barrett, barrettd@nyassembly.gov. We're going to squeeze in one more topic, carbon farming. This is a new initiative.
Right. I know,
What is carbon farming?
Carbon farming is basically carbon sequestration, getting the carbon back in the soil. So, as you mentioned, have been very supportive of our agricultural community here. It's one of the most robust parts of our region, and
right. People are visiting this area
to visit our farms
in a way that you can't even imagine if you go back 10, 15 years, right?
Exactly. And it's what's attracting young people to the area. It's enormous, and it's so important. At the same time, obviously, our environment is a huge issue, and the issues, the threats to the climate and the warming climate. Obviously, about this, and about carbon and the issue. We have tried for many years to tax carbon. That's been that sort of stick approach to trying to get people to...
With mixed results, right?
Right, exactly. So carbon farming is really kind of the carrot, and what we have done, we've introduced this legislation. We just got some money in the state budget to do a study to move this forward. But this is to incentivize farmers to follow through on practices like no-till or cover crops or other things that put the carbon into the soil. So instead of the punishment, we're incentivizing, we're encouraging them. And these are practices.
Are these new practices?
No, these are practices that have been going on forever. And there are a lot of farmers that, it really creates much healthier soils. It makes the soils more productive. I mean, these are time-honored and time-tested practices that not everybody does, but number of farmers have.
And you feel like this can make a difference on the local level?
On a national level. So our idea is to create a tax credit for farmers who practice these carbon farming, initiatives, and then and then support them to do this. So, and that's what our study is to figure out exactly how we measure and how we quantify the change, because we want to be sure that farmers who've been doing this for 25 years get the same kind of incentive and
sure.
As somebody who's starting from scratch and just doing this. So we want to be able to measure where the soil is at the beginning, and then the change. And this is something that affects farmers, whether they have 5 acres or whether they, have 5,000 acres. You could be doing this at whatever level. But this will really help the state reach its climate goals, because that carbon is getting out of the atmosphere, getting into the soil where it's really doing important work of making the soil more resilient, making the soil more productive, and and having kind of this win-win result. So I just it's something we're very excited. No other state has done this in this way. This idea of of an incentive. So we were very pleased. We just introduced this bill this winter, and the governor's team was adequately interested.
So what needs to happen now?
So our next step is to pull together Department of Environmental Conservation, the Ag and Markets, Tax and Finance, and get them together. And and there are tools that had been on federal Department of Agriculture websites. I don't know where those things stand because obviously there's been a lot of change in the last month or so. But there are metrics and measures, processes of measuring that are already in place. So we're going to pull all that together. There are farmers who are doing this, who have local farmers that we've been working with, young farmers who are so smart and on top of all of this. And so we're going to get together to figure out how we can then institute this tax credit, how we can make those measurements happen, how we can create a tax credit that reinforces what we want to have people do.
Very exciting work that you are engaged in. Didi Barrett, thank you so much for being our guest this afternoon. We're totally out of time. We're going to have you back again.
Look forward to it.
Soon. Assemblymember Didi Barrett for Assembly District 106. You can get in touch with Didi at barrettd@nyassembly.gov. Our guest this afternoon on 98.1 KZE for the Midweek Meetup. Safe travels. We'll see you down the road.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me today.